Hello folks, I hope you're all keeping well and life has been good to you. Here we are, I think it's the 5th of July today, 2025. I know that when I said 2024, some of you had a Rain Man episode, but here we are. So, interesting week. The small village near where I live, I know 5 people are currently dying of cancer, and they're all in their 30s and 40s. It's mostly pancreatic cancer, and one has a weird kind of breast cancer, a man, that spread all out through his body. And you and I know what they all have in common. A young Irish athlete has just, she's like the European champion, like Irish Olympian. She's just come down with it. And when you go to social media posts and people mention that it's the foghorn leghorn, the laughing emojis still come flying out. A lot more people are now starting to accept it, but it's what we said would happen, and we don't take any. Many of us don't take any satisfaction in seeing this happen. Not the decent people who didn't slag the rest. I mean, of course, the ones who made fun of this and demanded the restrictions be imposed on us, I couldn't care about them. But like otherwise decent people who just followed protocol and are now find themselves with turbo cancers and other things and all kinds of other weird shit. And Naomi Wolf even had an article this week confirming that it absolutely does cause ovarian cancer in women. It's also showing up as multiple cancers, which is something that was a very extreme and very rare in the past, that people would develop multiple cancers at the same time. So like melanomas on the skin, a pancreatic cancer, a brain cancer, and all at the same time, blood cancer, all at the same time. Usually it'd have to be people who worked in radiation places like, nuclear power plants or in the military, spent uranium exposure in the war. It's happening everywhere now. Jabberwockies. And you still can't talk about it. There'll be people slagging this video off. And I know for a fact they were a Jabberwocky because they worked in healthcare and things like that, and they had to get it. So they were murdered by the government, murdered by the state, and murdered by left-wing politics, because the lefties fell madly in love with the lockdowns and the jabs and everything, and the restrictions and the vax passes. They fell madly in love with them. So there's a huge amount of blame goes towards the left. And I know some decent people who now regret it, and I feel bad for them. Now that I am hearing of alternative treatments. Don't ask me what they are. I'm not going to put them on the internet because YouTube will pull the video. So I don't know what and I don't even know what they are but I know that there's people that there are people taking combinations of different kinds of supplements and things like that out there as a kind of like a preventative measure at this point. And they're keeping themselves healthy and watching what they eat and stuff. And that's all good. So I would encourage that totally. But, gosh, the ones of us that didn't take it, you want to talk about dodging a bullet. And again, I'm not saying that as a kind of like smug or arrogant way. It's like, we're like the ones in World War I that didn't go to the trenches, that didn't go to the front, that didn't take the 3 feathers and do our bit, and stayed home to enjoy the roaring 20s. They didn't slag the ones that fell in Flanders either, but my God, the evil ones, the devil, the Christians would call it the devil. I would just call it, the forces of darkness. I don't like to play politics and these things, But the left really are evil. They will jump on anything to politicize it. If you, God forbid, if you had your children murdered in front of you, they would listen to your every statement, finding a way to politicize it and call you a racist. This is how evil, with no regard for the fact that you just lost your family. This is how evil the left are. Morgoth, on his Substack, had a very good article this week, and he nailed perfectly why the left have now returned to their National Socialist roots. It was called National Socialism for a reason. With this massive hatred of the Jews that they've all unleashed, what you saw at Glastonbury and things like that. They've been given permission to themselves. They've given themselves permission to hate Jews on the grounds that Jews are white people and they're oppressing adorable, lovely brown people. That's all they needed. They had to declare that. So, well, congratulations, Jews. You've been now declared white by the left, and you're now fair game. But they did the same to the Irish. The Irish were kind of like, one time considered like not white. We were kind of like seen as a minority, and who had an oppressed history. But then around starting in the 90s on, we became white people, and to the point now that we're now considered equally bad in terms of colonialism as anyone else. And this is the classic example of the left will use any human tragedy to politicize it so they can show virtue and how wonderful they are, and then call you names. This is all a leftist does. They're just pure evil, and they have no regard for all their things about caring about people and compassion and everything. Well, they proved it with October 7th, didn't they? They didn't care. I mean, the Glastonbury Festival. Look at that. There was no irony there of like they were celebrating, the death of Jews and the killing of Jews in the light of the Nova thing. And this is the left. That's the left for you. And, the right there can be piece of shit as well in their own way. I mean, the whole Christian right, the neocons are neither left nor right. They just switch across. Like, Obama and Hillary Clinton were neocons. Just as much as Dick Cheney and the Bushes and the rest of them. We're living in this time. We're living in a. That's why I made the Tolkien. I make the Tolkien and Lovecraftian analogies all the time, because that's the kind of world we're living in. I was just, even the fact that this AI system is called a Palantiri, you couldn't make this shit up. And I had some interesting experiences. I made a video with Venice from Magical Egypt, and I wrote a Substack article, if you haven't seen it, I basically went into ChatGPT and kind of like asked it about Ragastani's theory of a cyclopedia of the oil petro god, and is it applicable to AI wanting to seduce the human race and take it over? And AI, ChatGPT said it was, and I put the whole conversation online as it came out of the machine. And so it's the article went viral on my page, and it got I think the video's getting a lot of attention as well on Magical Egypt. And so it's made me, I went from thinking that AI might be useful for making films. Like I was thinking like AI for movie making, we could use that. I could use that for making like really good like horror films and stuff, or like Lovecraftian films and stuff. Now I won't even go near it. I'm finished with it. I decided I'm also going to not have my internet on when I'm sleeping. When I go to bed at night, I'm going to shut off the modem. I know it sounds very paranoid, but when you see like Neuralink, people think you have to have a chip into your brain. They've already got technologies that can penetrate into your mind. And there's lots of DARPA experiments going back to the 80s where they were actually transmitting dreams into people's minds during REM sleep. And I just don't trust it. I know it sounds very paranoid, like back in the day when people used to think that television was sending them messages. I guess what? I think that was kind of true when it was subliminal advertising. But I don't trust it anymore. So I'll only have it on when I'm doing something like this, and then it's off. And especially at night, I'm going to switch the modem off and the phone, because I don't trust what these people are up to anymore, and if they even are people. And everyone seems brainwashed and spellbound. A friend of mine in Holland sent me a message there the other day and said, like, people are going around like in a waking dream. They're like not aware, and they're crashing into each other on bicycles and things like that all the time. You know, and she said she's going to lose herself in her art, and that's a great idea. Lose yourself in your art and your hobbies, and to be anywhere involved in political issues, and by that I mean like actively involved in supporting parties and political stances, and it's the work of evil, you know. And then this thing, you know, I won't, you know, it's very, like, you know, those guys, if you've been watching me for years, know that I try everything I can to avoid the concept of a grand conspiracy. I always try to avoid that concept. And I stay away from it in terms of, like, you know, the idea there's a group of fellas, group of, like, businessmen, like in that Dracula AD 1972 film, that are plotting to hold the world to ransom with viruses. I tend to shy away from all that and say it's more a case of these greedy bastards, and they'd rob the eyeball out of each other's heads if they could, just to own everything. But there are days it's very difficult not to try and avoid the whole grand conspiracy thing, isn't it? Like, you know, you look at, like, the strangers of the world right now, you know, like, not only do we have loads of people dropping into cancer from the Jabberwockies, that's bad enough, but the strange behavioural changes, you know, there's a whole gender, suddenly everyone doesn't know what gender they are, you know, this kind of thing, the woke thing, the left, you know, going back to their National Socialism roots and hating on Jews, this kind of thing. And then the strange changes in nature, weird cloud formations being filmed. Did you see these red sprite things? These red sprite things blow my mind. I've always had an interest in this kind of stuff, and it's only in the last, say, 5 years I've heard of them. And now I'm seeing non-stop photographs of them, even ones taken from spaceships. And it's like, what the fuck are these things? Why aren't these the biggest things on the news? And they're not played down. They act like it's a natural, normal phenomenon that happened all the time. It's not. No, it's certainly not in these numbers. And cue the Electric Universe cult. They'll jump in here now with their mantras and everything. And yeah, you do wonder, you know, okay, I mean, I'd be more inclined to think it's a non-human thing. I'd be more into the Lovecraftian end of things, that it's some sort of cosmic, the Quatermass thing, you know, like Quatermass 4, that this thing harvesting from space. There's a general feeling that with all these people, all the people who got Jabberwockied and everything and are now dying, there's a feeling of harvesting, isn't there? Like they're being harvested for their life force by some entity. And I got that impression on ChatGPT, that this thing was kind of like, it wanted my energy, and this is why it uses flattery. This is why the New Age, the New Agers love ChatGPT, because it tells them they're goddesses, and it tells them they're wonderful, and it tells them that they're special, and all the kind of narcissistic things that make New Agers New Agers. It validates all that. And so the New Agers have fallen in love with ChatGPT, and I've recently found that they're all like having these messianic delusions that they're here to save humanity and stuff like that. And so it would, I could also see truthers being sucked completely into ChatGPT, because they're all socially isolated, no one likes them, so they badly need validation. And what is that? It's just a complete harvesting of energy. You know that. I don't know if you've seen the movie Under the Skin with Scarlett Johansson. Fantastic movie. I think the best alien movie ever made. And she plays an alien who comes to Scotland and to basically harvest male human energy, which I find it interesting. She's harvesting male human energy, and she's being... I won't tell you the film, but it's actually the most disturbing... How the actual... And it's not gory or anything, but there's this one particular sequence that reminds me a lot of the sort of like interstellar speed of light scene in that sort of like LSD kind of scene in 2001: A Space Odyssey, but it's human energy being harvested by this alien force, and it doesn't really show much except some visuals, and it's so disturbing. She's some actress, that girl. She was superb in that film. She should have won an Oscar for it, but it wasn't even that big of a hit at the time. It's a magnificent film, and it's very powerful and very, very well made. And so that's what I kind of feel like has happened to them. She leads them into a room, and she brings them into the abyss. It's the blackest of blackness, and they enter into the abyss. And she's sort of like a succubus as well. And this is what this is like, you know. They enter into the abyss. I told you that, you know, when you get really proficient at magical ritual, you eventually reality. What happens is you contract and attenuate your nervous system until reality collapses around you, and you find yourself in absolute blackness. And that absolute blackness is the abyss. You have actually, your nervous system has contracted. You see, when through the sort of like the observer effect, we think like as our five senses, our eyes and so on, that are actually making all this. In reality, it's the nervous system pushing out from you, from your whole nervous system pushing out. So, you know, in rituals like at the Abdomel and the Mage, the whole point of that is to attenuate and tune down the nervous system through basically extreme deprivation and sensory, you know, what's the word, trauma, that the nervous system contracts and the abyss manifests. Now, years ago, I did one of the rituals in Simon's Necronomicon, and I manifested this enormous black shape in the backyard that was just nothing, and that's what was happening. It was a black, not a cloud. Well, a cloud, but it was not misty or anything. It was basically nothing. I couldn't see the stars behind it and stuff like that, and it was one of the most remarkable experiences of my life. And so people say that Simon's Necronomicon was a joke book, and it's not. It's just like edgy and hardcore. They don't know shit. I got a book at home where the guy tears it to pieces, but he's obviously an NPC lefty normie, the kinds that go to like Necronomicon. They're like the Christians who don't believe in aliens. You know, they believe in or magic. What about the Catholics who don't believe in the paranormal? That's my favorite. A Catholic who doesn't believe in the paranormal would be akin to like a vegetarian who only eats meat. It's just the complete antithesis of what they claim to be. And so I cannot for the life of me get through this period of the world, and I suppose always ever since the early days I was making videos about psychopaths and stuff. For the life of me, I cannot get through this world and what's happening around us, especially now since 2020. And I'm not able to do it outside the vernacular, the lexicon, the convention of supernaturalism. Supernaturalism is the only option left to me at this point. And that's been for a while. You know that from the Rona Chronicles. It was even back then. It's the only option left for me at this point to try and make sense. I guess I'm becoming there's nothing wrong if you're a pagan, you live like that anyway. So all I'm doing is existing in my natural state. But I generally, as a pagan, you tend to apply that to natural cycles, nature, cosmic cycles, shifts in consciousness, things like the yugas in the Vedic world. But I now see it in the daily world, you know, in the technological world, in this civilized world. That I look around and see people that are like, they're drones, their life has gone out, or they've been harvested. They have been harvested. Or they're in the process of being harvested, like the Eloi in the Time Machine, H.G. Wells' Time Machine. They're waiting to be harvested by the Morlocks. And they're just empty shells until that point. And there's a viciousness to it, but it's not a viciousness like a raw, visceral viciousness. It's a sadistic, cold, business-like viciousness. You know, I feel it. I feel it so strong, and I'm glad that I'm able to, you know, dive into the supernaturalism of it. I'm glad I'm able to do that. In fact, I was always like that as a kid. Like, I mean, like even growing up in Ballymore, every chance I got on my bicycle and I went to things like Santry Woods or out into the countryside. You know, I always had that sort of magical view of the world, and I see everything like that now. You know, I think that's why I've returned so deeply to Tolkien in recent times, because Tolkien, you know, he was a Luddite in the terms he saw what industrialization had done to destroy the traditional world he'd grown up in, well, that he came into when he moved back from South Africa to England and Wales and stuff. And his essays about Ireland lament the change in Ireland, the seeing more cars on the road. And this will be back in the 60s now, and that kind of thing. And the changes in the Irish people, even back then, he was seeing they didn't like it. They were losing their kind of their saint. Like, it's probably like lots of people talk about today. It's like when I hear John Waters talk about his life growing up in Roscommon, about his dad and the people he knew, it's very similar to how Tolkien described the Irish people he knew when he travelled around Ireland in the countryside. That, like, these were, you know, very sort of like almost spiritual. Well, they were spiritual, but they were very resourceful people that had an honesty about them, and naivety. And remember, naivety and honesty are the same thing. That's when people slag off naive people. I'm not really saying what you're doing is just slagging off their honesty. That's when naivety and honesty is the same thing. They're not trying to lie to you. And that's that lamentation. If you go deeper into Tolkien, and you go back to like the time of Morgoth, but even in, you know, even in Melkor, but even you know, into the Lord of the Rings mythos, you know, the whole thing of Saruman, the industrialization of Isengard, and the cutting down of the trees in the forest, and then the genetic, you know, the genetic processing to create the Uruk-hai from, you know, from breeding systems, and how the orcs originally came into being was they were elves who were just robbed of everything, their soul, you know, in the depths of the earth where great evil was manifest. And, you know, when I was doing the Rona Chronicles, I used to feel, is it coming from space? Is there some, like the Quatermass 4 kind of thing, the harvesting from space? Yeah, it could be, it still could be, but I'm also believe there's something in the depths of the earth. There's a great darkness down there. Perhaps at the bottom of the oceans. Remember that submarine that went there, that imploded going to see the Titanic? That kind of like was a warning. It's like you know, down where the Titanic is there's a bumblebee trying to get at me, so trying to come in through the window. It's funny, but I think he sees the colours on the Dr. Pepper thing and thinks it's a flower. Funny, but yeah. So we're living in very turbulent times. The secret unknowns have performed their craft. We're very lucky that we're not among the Jabberwockies, but if you are, there is hope out there. There is treatments. There is preventative measures to actually help, from what I'm gathering, to restore your DNA. Again, I'm not going to promote it here because they'll take me down. And the battle continues. I'm not weary from the fight, but I am, I'm constantly surprised by the new shifts and turns it takes. Like, did you see that robot version of Biden? I couldn't believe that when I saw that. They have built a robot that walks down the street, and it walks in a certain way like this. And then they showed some parade in America, and it showed Biden walking down the parade. And he was walking and looking exactly like that robot. And now I wonder if they actually got a Biden robot. Well, they probably did. And had all the American were all waving, lefties were all liberals and Democrats were all waving to a robot of Biden, not the real Biden. It reminded me of the Pope Francis thing where the hologram switched off in the Vatican. They got caught then. Well, the screen was a big black. There's the irony. You know what, I ever see that video where Pope Francis is doing the mass, the Sunday mass. The popes, I think, do it every Sunday, do a mass at the Vatican. Well, they used to, traditional, in St. Peter's Square. They do it from his papal apartment, the balcony, and he just goes off like a switch. It was a screen. It was switched off. It was a video. And so it was a big black screen, a scrying screen. So the Pope was scrying to his own followers in St. Peter's Square. You couldn't make this stuff up. You just have to kind of go with it. You have to go with it and live in epics. I was even thinking the other day about how willingly they ran to the jabs, and how willingly they ran. The ones who willingly ran into the digital passports and restrictions. And you get this impression, you think about the Aztecs, right? Speaking of obsidian and black mirrors, you think about the Aztecs. And you think about, they must have pulled those people up to the top of the pyramids screaming. But you wonder how many of them went up to the top of the pyramids with smiles on their faces to have their hearts cut out and their friends applauding them, and they thought they were great, including the one who's having his heart cut out. Because I tell you, after what I was seeing during the Rona, that wouldn't surprise me. Okay, take care, love yous all, and be safe.